So let's move on with the networking uplink configuration. So there are a couple things to keep in mind there. So what we're calling here is LAN Uplinks. LAN uplinks are just trunk links because I, of course, will allow multiple VLANs to go down towards my UCS system. Now, the thing is, I configured this as a switchboard mode trunk. By default, the fabric interconnect is not a switch unless I enable that. Nobody will enable that. In UCS 1.0 there was one reason to enable it, and currently there is no reason to enable switch mode. By default, the fabric interconnect will run in a mode called end host mode. This end host mode means that I will not run spanning tree. I will not switch the traffic, so I will not be a transit switch. So I can never send traffic from one uplink to the other uplink. That's what this says. So if I take my uplink, my fabric interconnect here, 2 uplink ports, packet received on one uplink will never go out on the other. So I will never loop myself. What I do instead is, I will come back to that a couple times more today. If I have my blade server here or the fabric extender and assume that it goes across the fabric extender and then eventually ends up in a port here, what it will do is, you can imagine what I'm going to say here, pin the traffic to an uplink. So the end host mode uses port pinning. So first of all, if you take the full topology, fabric interconnect, fabric extender, blade, everybody has a link to each other, and they will both do port pinning. So the blade sends a packet, the blade will get pinned according to the fabric extender port pinning, right? So that static port pinning that's not going to change when a link is removed or when there is a port channel, I'm just going to load balance it. Then here, I will have a second layer of pinning. That pinning is going to happen on the same way. So I'm still going to pin from client to uplink interface. But there is one exception, and that is, of course, there will be another blade here, blade 2, also having its own link, sending traffic, getting pinned to an uplink, going upwards on the link. And what then will happen is that the fabric interconnect does support local switching for blades. So I can do local switching for blades, meaning traffic from blade 1 to blade 2 can go across this link and go down to blade 1. So blade 2 sends a packet that blade 1 needs to receive. The fabric interconnect will local switch that. Why? Because it's not as stupid as the FEX. Now, it will do MAC learning here. There is MAC learning on that port, where on the FEX that is not the case. On the FEX, everything is forwarded out. The fabric interconnect will do MAC learning, and it will support local switching for blades internally. So that's something that I will support in the first place. But for uplinks, I pin the traffic to an uplink and I stick to that pinning. So let's first focus on this piece. Because I have that port pinning, what I can also do is port channels, like I'm used to. So first of all, I configure multiple VLANs going down to my UCS. And I can run port channels, and those port channels are always configured with LACP. I cannot disable that. They are always going to run LACP. But that's okay, right? So let's configure some VLANs and let's configure a port channel on our UCS. So let's first prepare the network to support our UCS. So my connections are going to 9 and 10 of each of my Nexus 5Ks. Let's go to switch 3. So let's configure our Nexus 5Ks. Enable LACP, and I'm gonna put interface E1/9 and 10 into a port channel. Like I said, it's gonna be a LACP port channel, so that's something that I need to enable here. And I say this is a switch port mode trunk. Allowed VLAN 500 through 600. And because this is not a switch but a host, I configure this port to be an edge port, remember? No, shut. So I created 100 VLANs like that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start configuring my LAN uplink. I do that exactly the same way as I would configure a server link. So I go to my, on the Fabric Interconnect A, because that is connected to switch 2. I go into my unconfigured Ethernet port section and I go to ports 9 and 10 because I know that that is my Ethernet uplink. I'm going to right click and say configure this as an uplink port. Yes, thank you. Now what did this do in terms of CLI? So if I go back to my UCS Fabric Interconnect CLI, if I now go to my 1/9, it didn't do anything. Oh, it's the wrong Fabric Interconnect. It's configured as a switch port mode trunk, allowing the VLAN that is configured. So this trunk allowed VLAN list will always mention every VLAN that you create. And I can show you that. So if I go here in my LAN configuration and I say create a VLAN, I'm going to call it data 1, VLAN ID 500, configure it. If I go back to my CLI and I do a show running again, I see that that VLAN 500 is now added to my allowed list. So we create our port channel here in the LAN section, under the LAN cloud section. Question, is disjointed layer 2 something that is potential tested topic? Definitely yes. That is definitely possible to be on your test. And that's also why I want to spend some time on it, that you know exactly what it does and how it works and where to find it. That's the first step actually. So I will come back to that in a second after I enable the port channel. So under the fabrics here, I see that I now configured fabric A, because there under my uplink interfaces are my ports 9 and 10. And fabric B, I do not have anything yet because I did not configure the uplinks there. So what I do is I go to the port channel section and I say create a port channel. So I get a nice wizard about creating a port channel. Okay, I'm going to say this is Rick's port channel. Go next. Add some links into it, 9 and 10, and finish. That wasn't too hard, right? I go into my port channel configuration and it's going to be disabled by default. By the way, this admin speed that you see here, don't pay too much attention to that. You do not need to change this. This is just an administrative value. Operational wise, it's going to run at the maximum bandwidth. So it's going to run at the 20 gig speed or the 30 or the 40 gig speed or even more. This admin speed, don't change that unless they specifically ask you to do that. But I don't see a reason why, because it has no use for the rest. It's just an administrative value, just the bandwidth value under the interface. So of course, enable the port channel. Now what did this do in terms of CLI? I see that my interface E1/9 is now an active port into a port channel. So that channel group 1 mode active is now the new command on here. I can even do a show port channel summary and check what's happening. I can see that LACP is activated, although I did not ask for it. It's going to be activated either way. And I can see that both my interfaces 9 and 10 are participating. So when we go to our switch 2, I'm going to do a show port channel summary. I should be able to see here as well that my port channel 10 is participating on both ports. So, looks good. We have configured our port channel. Now, like I just said, all of the VLANs that you configure, either per fabric or globally, are going to be allowed by default. Of course, there can be situations where you would not want that, like the following. And that's what they call, in the UCS, they call that disjointed layer 2.